Morning everyone, and this is the Chronicles of the War. I think it's day 16 now, and we are trying to do anything to help really, and we are uniting Ukrainians. And for the first week it was just so impossible to think what exactly has to be done. That's why I think I told you in the previous video, we spent so much time just trying to reach out to the Russians and ask them to do something to stop the war, which didn't help at all, because at the end a lot of them were just accepting. So we'll try some different strategies, and I'll give you an idea of what we're doing. This is me and my outfit of the day. I'm just kind of dressing up to feel stronger and to be a bit more empowered, and I know that we have to stop the war, so we'll try to contact different people who actually mean a lot in the government to shift their minds, because it's a very, very big problem. Something that's really need to know, it's incredibly hard, and to understand that your land, that is your motherland, is being bombed and somebody wants to take it and invade it. I think it's like, if somebody was just trying to break in into your home and steal something and kill your parents. So this is what we feel, because our people are being killed without any reason. We didn't do any harm to anybody. We are just a nation that's been fighting for years for the independence, and we finally got it in 1991. So 30 years old nation. Yes, quite young, not like the American nation or the English nation, but with a very, very big history at the same time, going back to early 1000s, 900 something, when the great Vladimir has baptized the people who were living in the area of Kiev, and they decided they're going to be Christian. So that was the point that we decided to become a part of the Western civilization. We didn't go to adopt Muslim or other religions that were also available in the region. So this is the point that everything started, and we were fighting so long for this. And I think I told you about the Holodomor. So there was a real thing that our people just were being killed, and their food was taken away, because back in the day, there were money was not really in the world, so everything was about the food and the grain. So they would come to people who grown a lot of food in Ukraine, because the lands were good and people were so hard working, and they took it away. And they wanted to sell the food. So it was during the Russian Empire, and the revolution already started, but Russia started to understand that they're not strong. They wanted to have a strong army. I don't know for what reason, but basically they took away food from people in Ukraine. They took away the grains, so people didn't have any food left to survive. So a lot of them died in order to sell the grains on the market, and it was very valuable at the time, as it always is actually. So we are gonna be seeing it again repeating, and with Ukraine not being to produce any crops this year, we will see a huge rise in food prices, even more than what's happening these days. But just to tell you that it's in our history, we were fighting for this freedom, and we wanted to live free in our land, and that's why our people are fighting. And we don't have any conflict with Russia actually. We just have they want to take our land, and they want to take our lives because they want to be imperialist. I don't know, they are just forgetting they're living in 2022. Maybe they go back to 1800s or something, when they think they could just come, kill, torture people and submit them into patriotism to Russia. It will never happen. And at the point, I think I told you, I feel like even if all the Ukrainians gonna get killed, it's not gonna happen, but if in theory they would not be able to own Ukraine or Ukrainian people, they're not gonna submit in this. So that's why when people say, oh, just have a peace talks, no, there's no peace talks, because there are killers, they're coming to kill. What do you talk about to the killer? You just put them into prison, or not in prison, or you give them a terminal sentence. So that's what's happening. So there are no peace talks needed in this situation, because it's Ukraine who is being tortured. We're not at war with anybody. Russia is always at war with everybody. They wanted to take our land, the Crimea, we just okay, you want to take Crimea. Nobody was fighting that, okay, take the Crimea, but they didn't stop there. They wanted to take other lands of the Ukrainian people, and that's why it doesn't work. But we all live in a world where everybody is interconnected. And yes, Ukraine is in the middle of the Europe, in Eastern Europe, and the neighboring countries are Poland and Romania and other countries in the north that bordering with Belarus, that also currently is taken over by Russia. So everybody should be feeling the same threat, and if it's not being stopped now, like how many more deaths can be encountered? And I think the West and the European countries are risking too much waiting so long to actually break Russia completely, because it's an aggressor and they will not stop. And you know, these idiots, they actually can take, you know, they already took control of the power plants. So they're threatening, okay, there's going to be a nuclear attack, but that's what they're going to do anyway. So right now, if there will be a no-fly zone, you need to understand this. They will be able to anytime bombard the nuclear power plants, and there'll be another Chernobyl, Hiroshima. It will be like nuclear disease. So it's not an option not to close the sky. Like we have no option, because we all live in this continent, in Europe. So everybody has to come together. You know, Ukraine is doing everything they already can, but the West thinks like, okay, we're gonna just let another like 1,000 people die in Ukraine and we'll just wait and see. And how do you feel about that? Like, really, I don't think it's the right thing to do, honestly. And they have to be stopped, because you know, when and if, you know, another Chernobyl starts and all this radiation, it travels by air freely. You cannot stop it, you cannot contain it by any walls. Radiation is like going everywhere, while like now you can do stuff to kind of stop it, and you're not doing it. So I don't know, maybe the Europe wants to kill itself. I don't think that. So please share this video with your friends, and I'll show you some of the immediate steps that could be done. So this is something that I'm going to be working on today. We're just gonna work on emails. So I was trying to understand what action to take. So some of the actions were not useful at all, and it's important also to be strong inside. So it's important to, you know, keep your inner peace and you know, keep the strategy going to do what you do best, and this will eventually work, but it will just take a lot of work to do. So I know a lot of Ukrainian people are so lost, and they're trying to help, and they do a lot of hectic actions. Just stick to what you're doing, really. Like, take one or two things that you can do really well, like volunteer or fundraise, or, you know, assist people who come into your country, assist the refugees. So I decided I'm gonna be working in international relations. That's something that I did at university, and it's a good time to do it. So yesterday I actually contacted some people from the Ukrainian embassy in the UAE, and they said that yeah, we can talk, but just decide what exactly you want to do. And I think these days, and I have this community here over YouTube, so I'm gonna spread information here. So here are some of the actions that I think we could do today. And yes, I don't want to go again into the details of everybody who were being bombed in Ukraine, because it's happening. And yes, today my native city of Dnipro is also started to be bombed by air. So this means there is no like limit for them to stop. I don't know, do we need to actually wait for them to run out of their weapons from the air and cause even more civilian death? And they are not civil at all. They are bombarding hospitals and they're bombarding schools. So why does everybody think that it is okay? I just was listening to a presenter of one of the American channels, and she was explaining why it's not possible to impose a no-fly zone. Yes, maybe they waited, but the situation is escalating, as we can see from the air. On the land, Ukraine is fighting very bravely, very well, but we don't have enough planes, and the security of the whole Europe is under threat. And we know that people like that, like Putin, like Hitler, if you look at this table, I actually have a really good infographics for you, which explains that Russia was always the aggressor, and they started so many wars through the years. So even back when it was the USSR, there was a war in Afghanistan, and without any grounds, they just, I think people, they just have like this war fanatics that just want to go fight. fight and they think. There was a really, really good interview on the guy who was one of the, you know, majors, like one of the generals of the Donbass takeover when the Russia decided to come there. And when you watch this interview, just understand how creepy these people are. They come from the families of military, and they think that it is their task of their life to just go and fight and for freedom, for the emperor, not for freedom, but for you know, my land, you know, and it's purely fascist because it doesn't give that person individually any benefit from that. It's just pointless, and it's so, you know, like medieval and so barbaric. So it has to stop. And I just told you because these people really believe that it's the thing to do. So it's the disease in the head. It's like the fascists, you know, what happened in Germany. And we have these lessons of the history. And, you know, yes, when the war just started, we didn't know about the Holocaust and everything else that happened. And it was just revealed later. And many people didn't believe. But we have to take lessons from the historical, you know, historical lessons that happened not so long ago, like in the past century. So it seems that now Europe is not learning from these historical lessons, and we do have to learn. So since you know, 1990s, Russia was in a war with Moldova in the region of Pridnestrovye in 1992. They also made like self-imposed war conflicts that they never actually named it war. They called it like anti-terrorist or anything anti-terrorist. And killings, the civilians, for them it means war. So they did a few conflicts in Chechnya, one of the regions that is Muslim, and they wanted to be independent from Russia. Russia has a lot of nations, so I think a lot of the nations in Russia are not going to be feeling that they want to be separated. So, and it will help them too if the West comes forward and will, you know, help to finish off the Putin and his army. They actually will help liberate a lot of Russian nations who lived under this empire of Russia for so many years. And if you represent one of those communities, so please also come forward and ask for the no-fly zone to support Ukraine, because the fallout of Russia will benefit to you personally on a very big level. So in 1994, 1996, they had a Chechnya, then they had it again, and there was so many civilian deaths. It was just like so barbaric, like there was like dead people everywhere. 1999, and so they actually lasted for decades, and the people of Chechnya, they really wanted their independence. They fought so hard that they created like they had a special, you know, forces doing some operations in you know, there were terrorist attacks on Moscow to just say that we demand independence. And yeah, that's normal. People want to fight for their freedom. I think they have to be supported in this. So whatever, like somebody wants them to be like really independent, let it happen to them. But I'm not talking here about like Donetsk region, because it was not real. Like they put forces in there to create this, you know, seeming independence, while for 30 years country lived and they were part of the Ukraine. And as I told you before, like all the like educated people who have some property in Donetsk and Lugansk, they didn't go to Russia. They went to Kiev. So they wanted to stay in the Ukraine, and they did. They stayed. So the whole region wanted to be part of the Ukraine. There was never any you know, problem inside of the Ukraine otherwise, other than like Russia trying to do something about it. And they were also having war conflicts in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, also parts of Russia and parts of the Georgia, is also coming to another sovereign nation to just like fight. And you know, people of Russia don't understand how much money goes into this, and they're quite poor. If you don't look at you know, Moscow and St. Petersburg, all other places, and if you go in the villages, people just like live in poverty, and they don't have good schools and, you know, any hospitals, and they don't even have like the roads that are properly made. So they have so many of their own problems that they are keeping blind for, because the government puts in their heads that, you know, we have to keep strong and fight with the whole world, or defend ourselves. So this is a historical problem, and that's, I'm saying it again so you understand that there is no Ukraine's fault in this problem. Our people fought for our independence, and we ourselves would choose what kind of future we want to create for our kids. And it's just that they're not happy to hear it, because they wanted Ukraine to remain submissive. So there are no peace talks necessary. They just have to stop the war and call their army back. And we're going to be fighting until the end, but please, we were asking the West to help us to send the planes, the troops, to just like avoid much more civilian death. And, you know, babies were dying and they were killed, and people died of dehydration in Mariupol. And now it started in all the cities, not just in the east, in all the places. And the only, you know, advantage they have is from the air. So they really have to be stopped, because they will not stop in Ukraine. They will go to Romania, to Poland, to Lithuania, if they let, like, if they're not, you know, we don't ceasefire them. So today I'm just going to be working on sending, you know, letters and emails following up on the petition. So if you want to help, you can do that too, and just stay active, like have a good LinkedIn profile, because I feel like European nations, they don't see Ukrainians as, you know, they are brother nations. They see us like a younger and developing nations. And you know, the shots that are always we can see on the TV and of the people who escape to Europe, the refugees, and they show a lot of like poor regions of the Ukraine, but it's not the whole picture. I want some of my other friends to come forward. You know, they don't share what happens to other parts of the Ukraine, because people are just being protected, and most of the people, they don't live Ukraine. They still in the Ukraine. They just went to safer place. They don't want to be refugees. They want to be there and defend their land and keep their businesses going. So we have really strong people in Ukraine who loves Ukraine and is ready to fight for Ukraine. But we're just not an army nation, so that's why you'll have to understand that it would be a really good deal if Ukraine was a part of NATO, because you know, I think we thought in our day and age we don't need to have a specific, like very strong army and allocate money and people to the army that will be created to fight. So now only like normal civilians of the Ukraine are fighting, and this is kind of normal. So some of the things that I think we could do today, I shared it on my social media. So go and you know, we signed a petition for NATO to close the sky over Ukraine, and today I got email back from Natalia Kostyuk. So she said, oh, today we're sent again a letter of appeal with a petition to the NATO military administration and Europe, and she's sharing the emails of the press office and European Council and other press centers, and she's linking another one. So she says, we are patiently waiting for an answer, but we also ask each of you to write them a letter in person, so the word will be spread. And also other things that we realized we have to do is to communicate more in English, not in Russian, because communicating to Russian people proved to be inefficient. They're not ready to do anything. They can't do anything right now. We only can speak to Europe and ask them to actually help us. So yeah, spread the message that Putin has to be stopped. He's like Hitler. He's unreasonable, and we have a proof that he's unreasonable and his government is unreasonable, because they're bombarding, you know, hospitals and delivery wards. So you know, this nice like girl who is in Mariupol, and she was pregnant, and like they bombarded the hospital and they had to escape her, and another couple, their baby has died, I think, when it was bombarded. So they were like really broken, and we just don't have any tears anymore, but it's something that we can do, so we need to do the action. And yes, there will be no peace talks. The message number 2, no peace talks, because we don't have conflict with Russia. They're having some problems with us, and it's a pure genocide, and they want to kill us, just like, you know, 100 years ago during the Holodomor, when they wanted to put people into starvation, and it's historical documents existing for this. So number 3 is, yes, the nuclear security is already a threat, so imposing of the no-fly zone is not an option anymore. It's an essential piece because the situation is escalating today. There were other cities in Ukraine, all over Ukraine, bombarded, not just in the east but in the west, like Ivano-Frankivsk and Lutsk. So it is escalating, and while they now keep the control of the nuclear power plants, it's possible that we won't be able to avoid another Chernobyl, and it's the same as a nuclear war response if it's gonna happen, because radiation cannot be contained, so it's not an option any longer not to close the sky. It has to be done, and this will actually help Russian people to think hard, and it's actually very much possible that their army in another week they will decide that they will go back and they will fight Putin and his government, and they create the revolution, and everything will actually work out very, very well. And another one, yes, that is Ukraine is producing a lot of agriculture and a lot of food. That's corn has been exported to the EU. So if Ukraine won't be able to yield this, these crops this year, there will be a huge food crisis together with the rising energy prices. It puts a lot of people in poverty, and governments will suffer a lot more than just, now for military help. They'll have to feed the hungry and the poor, and the prices for food stuff are just going to be so huge. So I'm gonna go now and write all the emails, and keep active on your social media, keep your profile open, right, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. There are community groups, or there are pages of the NATO, of the EU Commission, where they put the posts, and you can comment and communicate to people, communicate these exact ideas. Use Instagram to comment politicians, to leave comments under the messages and tag them in your posts, so you'll have more exposure. Share stories about what you did and what happens on social media, but not just in Instagram stories, because they're getting less views now. Use posts and use hashtags Stand with Ukraine, Close the Sky, Ukraine, and a no-fly zone. So let's do this together, and we will fight this evil. But please, Europe and the UK, you have to help us. Yes, thank you for all the military help, all the humanitarian help, but this is a big problem. You've all seen the Chernobyl movie and series, and it is a very, very big risk that it happens again. Otherwise, historic lessons of the Hitler, he didn't stop in Poland. He didn't stop by just killing the Jews and killing people in Poland. He went all the way to other places in Europe. So yes, act now, don't stop, and close the sky.